Hello, I'm Diana Felzone, a senior reporter at Mediaite. Welcome to Behind the Byline, where I speak with some of the most compelling people in media and politics today. On Behind the Byline, we delve into who they are, where they came from, and what makes them tick. A person first, a public figure second. Today I'm joined by CNN's Chief Legal Affairs Correspondent, Paula Reid. Thank you for being here, Paula.
Of course, I'm thrilled to join you.
It is great to have you. So we're a little over a week into the Trump administration, and I commend you for your tireless coverage. I mean, I watch you and I'm like, she must be exhausted. How do you think it's going?
As expected, the product is exactly as advertised. President Trump said he would do certain things, be it pardon people related to January 6th, end birthright citizenship, begin deportations, and he's done all of those things. What's important for our coverage, though, is to look at exactly what the promise was and what exactly was delivered. That's the challenge right now. But as of now, it's clear they're coming in more experienced. They had a plan so that they could hit the ground running on day one. This is everything that they said they would do.
I've spoken with some people who have been publicly critical of Trump in the past, and they've expressed to me they are sincerely concerned for their safety and the possibility of facing punishment. Do you think that's a legitimate fear for those people to have? And I want to go into not only just a fear base, but from a legal perspective. How could President Trump seek revenge on his perceived political enemies?
I think it depends who you are. As we saw last week, he is rescinding publicly funded security for certain people that he does not like. But when it comes to the legal ramifications, I think if you worked on Special Counsel Jack Smith's investigation, you should expect that the Justice Department in particular, they're going to look into everything you did. Every text message, every email, every decision that you made. And I personally don't expect that they're going to find any sort of criminal behavior, but all of that is going to be investigated because the president and his lawyers, they feel so personally aggrieved. And I think that this is something people don't fully understand. Yeah, Trump never likes prosecutors, right? But he doesn't speak the same way about Fani Willis as he and his lawyers do about Jack Smith and about some of his prosecutors. There's a personal grievance that is animating what they are going to do in terms of the legal investigations. I don't anticipate there are going to be criminal charges. I don't expect there was criminal conduct here, but I absolutely expect that the Justice Department is going to look into the federal prosecutors who were involved in Jack Smith's cases. Both of them. And it was surprising to me at the end of the Garland administration, right, that term, people didn't even believe me. They seemed a bit maybe naive about how much animosity there is between Trump's lawyers, many of whom are now going to be top administration officials, and the special counsel's office. So legally, I think those people should be worried that they're going to be investigated, but I don't expect that anyone is going to end up going to jail. But look, I haven't seen every text message that was sent.
And we also, you look at Bolton and he had his, like you said, security taken away, Fauci's security taken away. And we're in a very inflammatory environment. So it's not necessarily, let's say, that they might face criminal charges, but there could definitely be a quote unquote mob mentality that happens on Meta or X or any of those kinds of platforms.
Absolutely. And that's something, for the past decade, really since the email investigation into Secretary of State Clinton, the vitriol online that I've experienced in covering legal cases, it just continues to escalate and it is amplified. And it is something that President Trump has not really tried at all to tamp down. And it's clear that he's sending messages to his adversaries, including firing inspectors general, right? If you're not on board with me, you're going to lose your job. They're supposed to be the independent watchdogs. It is chilling. But I go back to saying, this is a lot of what they said they would do. Elections have consequences.
And, you mentioned the inspectors general. Isn't there a law that says there has to be given a reason for firing inspectors general? Not to mention, I think it was at least 17 and it happened overnight and it was a surprise to anyone. And there was no reason given by President Trump.
That's exactly right. So even some of his closest allies, Trump's closest allies, his most ardent defenders, this weekend on the Sunday shows couldn't quite defend this. But how do you enforce that? That's always the question, right? What is the consequence? Who is going to push back? What is the mechanism to push back on this kind of abuse? It was notable to me that one of the inspectors general who survived was the Justice Department's Inspector General, Horowitz. He's been the longest serving Inspector General. He has survived through multiple administrations. And it was notable to me that he was sort of one of them that survived this time around.
So we know that Trump is testing his limits of presidential powers. You just mentioned some of the things that he's done. He's issued several executive orders, such as eliminating diversity, equity, and inclusion DEI programs, banning transgender military service members, which I believe is expected to be signed today, Monday, conducting ICE raids in schools and churches, imposing tariffs on Colombia. We mentioned just firing more than 17 inspector general and more. And we see on social media, at least I see on social media, Instagram, X, Facebook. I'm not on TikTok. I just haven't done that yet. That people are unnerved. And you use the word chilling. I mean, can the president's power be checked?
So what's interesting about covering President Trump, as I did in the first term and again now, is every day is a new constitutional question, often which has never been contemplated in the history of our country. So he plays at the edges of executive power. And I do think he is going to find some lines that he's crossed. I'm going to use birthright citizenship as an example. He's trying to do away with birthright citizenship through executive order. Legal experts on both sides of the aisle say, look, it's not likely to work. He's going to lose at the trial court. Even his own advisors tell me that. They're going to lose at the appellate court. It's unclear if the Supreme Court is even going to want to take this one up, but it's not clear that he can win. So I think that is an example of where he will likely find the limits of what you can do with the stroke of a pen. And if he wants to change birthright citizenship, he has to go through Congress. But then there are areas where he does have a lot of power, and he's shown that with tariffs, with deportations. It's clear. He and his advisors, they have studied what happened the first term, and they are trying to be more sophisticated, more crafty this time, so that they don't have everything they try to do blocked by legal challenges. But ultimately, I think it's going to be the courts, the judiciary, specifically the Supreme Court, that will be responsible for keeping Trump in check. And that's a conservative supermajority, a third of which he has appointed, that just a few months ago expanded his protections and immunity for everything he does in office. So this isn't just an issue, the limits of executive power. For me in particular, it is the issue in the Trump administration. And he is constantly testing those limits.
Mm-hmm. Steve Bannon, I believe, said recently to the Washington Post, we're being flooded. The
Yes.
media is being flooded so that they can't cover it all. They don't know what's happening. It's like a whiplash, right? And this is where the media comes into it, because as a journalist, you speak truth to power. There's been criticism that the media might be bending the knee to Trump this time around. Jeff Bezos, the owner of the Washington Post, he spiked an endorsement for president this year, breaking a decades-long tradition, then cut to seeing him on stage with Trump during the inauguration, along with several other billionaires like Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk, who both control two of the largest social media networks, Meta and X. Do you think reporters are going to have a more difficult time getting out the truth during this administration this time around?
I mean, it's always really difficult. And I could tell you stories from the administration that just departed that made it very difficult to cover stories. But I think the biggest thing that changes the way we do our job is that the media landscape is different right now, right? I mean, the Washington Post is not what it was 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago when it was pumping out massive Trump scoops every single day, competing with the New York Times. The major networks are not what they were, and their influence continues to be diminished. Social media, which is effectively right in an echo chamber at this point. You have influencers giving people their news. That has just really come up in the past 4 or 5 years. Even Twitter, where a lot of people were kind of aggregating their news in the last Trump administration, it's now X. We know it's not what it used to be. A lot of people are fleeing because they believe that too has become an echo chamber. And I do believe that's one of the challenges is anytime you enter the arena, you just have these camps, these amplifiers of spin and nonsense coming at you, but it makes the mission, just the basic reporting of facts every single day, that much more important. But I do think it's challenging for a number of reasons. And a lot of it has to do with the state of our industry.
What advice would you offer your fellow journalist covering this administration right now?
Something actually Major Garrett said to me when I was covering the first Trump administration, and it would get especially chaotic. Again, it's not just the chaos in the White House, it's also the chaos in the industry. You can have chaos in your own life. He would just tell me, he said, focus on the work. And that is the most important thing. Don't get tripped up by, a comment that a White House official made to you on Pebble Beach in front of the cameras, or pickup for your story, or a hate for your story. Just focus on the work. Get the best sources, talk to everyone, speak truth to power, make sure you are 100% accurate. Because again, there's no room for mistakes. If you make any little misstep, there's again that whole astroturf echo chamber just dying to seize on that and try to undermine the credibility of the entire industry. So I just think focus on the work, not the noise, just focus on the work. That's the most important thing. So if you're covering an executive order or tariffs on Colombia, whatever it is, just really focus on the reporting itself. That is the most important thing amid all of the chaos.
Right. Now that's very solid advice. And I want to go into how you got to where you are now. Tell us a bit about why you got into the media. You have a legal background, but what I always say, like somebody has that moment where they're like, gosh, I could really get to the bottom of this. I could figure this out. I could expose these things. I can illuminate it. What was your like, I want to be a journalist moment?
I just love telling stories about my experience in the legal world. I graduated from law school in 2008. I passed 2 bar exams. I had a clerkship, which is supposed to be like the best job you can have. 2008, 2009, 2010, remember the crash, a lot of my friends were losing their big law jobs. And it was a moment to really reflect, right? There are no guarantees here, even if you get a big job, there are no guarantees. And I was traveling from my clerkship in Wilmington to where I lived in Philly. And I was reading books by Jan Crawford, by Jeffrey Toobin, by folks who their entire job was to tell stories about the law. And I realized that my favorite thing about my job in the clerkship wasn't, filing filing paperwork, or God knows, it wasn't dealing with a judge, but it was telling stories about how the law was influencing people's lives, families, businesses. And I thought, wow, these people can do this as a career. Can I? And at the moment, it seemed like a decent time to take a risk, because even the most stable, solid legal jobs were being taken away from people. People were being laid off. All my law school classmates, most of them were losing those jobs. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to try this. And so I saved up a little money and I got an internship in local news, and I fell in love with news. And then my next internship was at CBS News in New York. And to tell you how much I loved it, I took the Bolt bus, may it rest in peace, from Philadelphia to New York every day to work for free for about 6 months. I was about to run out of money. And then I got my first job. It was a $26,000 a year. And it wasn't that long ago, okay? And it was $26,000 a year fact checker for the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric. And I loved it. I mean, it was Deepwater Horizon was the big story. I wasn't doing anything legal. I was calling to figure out, how many turtles had been repatriated from the oil spill each day. But I loved it. And it filled me with such purpose. And eventually I wanted to get into the legal lane. But that's really the backstory, is there was a moment where I said, I think this is what I want to do. And it's pretty clear to me right now amid the crash and so many people losing their jobs that there are no guarantees. So why not follow something that you feel passionate about?
Was there someone who you consider to be a mentor throughout your career that you looked to for advice, helped you kind of figure out how to get from an internship to then getting, from A to B?
Yeah, I think there've been a series of people. I think when I got off the Bolt bus, I was useless. I mean, I was a geriatric intern who had no experience in journalism. I mean, Armin Katayan was the correspondent. I mean, I could go get pizza when he'd buy it for the group. I was good at that. But pretty much everything, it was a steep learning curve. His supervisor, a guy named Keith Suma, I think saw that there was something with me. I could call people, get them to talk to me. The work ethic was clearly there. And then through time, there was another investigator producer, Len Tepper, Jan Crawford, who I mentioned. She's given me some great pieces of advice. Major Garrett and the legendary Susan Zarinsky at CBS News really helped me at key moments. So there hasn't just been one person, but at different phases. I really feel like the universe has brought the right people to kind of steer me, even in very unexpected or chaotic situations that we sometimes find ourselves in this
Right.
business.
And many times.
Many a time.
And I think there's, like you said, you have to have a passion for it because it's a
Yeah.
very trying career. And I always say it's like you're a doctor on call because you could be having the nicest weekend planned out that you're like, okay, it's my kid's birthday. We're going to have a birthday party with 25 toddlers. And then your phone rings and it's a huge scoop and you just can't turn your back on it. I mean, how do you, and I'm jumping a little ahead here because you are a mom of a young child, how do you handle this? I find it like a hour by hour kind of thing in my life of how I handle it, and I'd love to get your take because I'm always looking to gather knowledge.
I'm going to go back like 10 years. I met with Jan Crawford, who's a legal correspondent at CBS at that time. She's a mother of 4 children. And I asked her, a little doe-eyed, like, what is your secret? And I remember she's like, do you want kids? I said, yes. And she said, you want kids and you want to do this? And I said, yes. And she said, you need a full-time stay-at-home husband. And at the time I was like, what? Like, I was in some like tortured situationship with like a sports executive. I was not thinking like logical mating choices, but it kind of stuck with me. And as fate would have it, my husband and I got married. And when we just did the math after we had our daughter, he didn't really want to go to a job where most of the money would be eaten up by taxes and childcare. And so he is a full-time stay-at-home dad. And right now, that is my great like asymmetrical career advantage because my daughter is the most important thing. I never worry about where she is. They cook together. They have a little herb garden that they're working on. She's always safe. She's always with him. In terms of career, I'm not having to worry about daycare. I am not having to worry about a nanny, preschool sickness, any of that. And that is the reality of working parent life. And the entire system also of the world is designed expecting that you have a full-time adult at home who can take people to appointments and wait for repair people. So at this stage of my life, I mean, that is the greatest really blessing in my life. It is my number one luxury that my husband takes care of our daughter. And I am not having to deal with all of the responsibilities that I do think disproportionately fall on women and do adversely affect their careers. I mean, I'm the control study, right? If you have that, my first year back from maternity leave, I mean, I broke some of the biggest stories. I got a promotion. I was nominated for a Pulitzer. I'm pretty sure that none of that would have happened if I didn't have this, even if I was going 50-50. So I'm so grateful to him. It's not something that everybody can swing, but right now, that is the biggest advantage that I have in terms of being able to balance career and motherhood.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because I grew up with a father who always told me, he said, the number one most important decision you will make in your life is who you choose to be your life partner. That will influence everything that follows. And he would always point me to Bobby Brown and Whitney Houston because Whitney
Yes,
Houston was my idol.
yes, yes.
And he would just always say, like, she had everything, but perhaps she didn't choose the best suited partner for herself. So what you're saying makes a lot of sense, and it takes a lot of foresight to choose wisely because as we know when we're younger, sometimes we go for someone who totally doesn't make any sense for what our goals are, and they need to align. But it wasn't easy for you to achieve motherhood. You and I share something in common. We both went through in vitro fertilization, that process, which is very daunting, can be very hard and very costly. You shared your story with People Magazine. Why was it important for you to be so open? Because there's still, there's always stigmas with everything when you talk about women's health, still to this day.
I think it's important. I mean, I'm pretty open about it because I think it's important for people to know. And I also don't want anyone to look at me at, 39 or 42. Oh, you're having a kid. I can wait that long too. Because I was so methodical when I was coming into this business. I would make a list of like 5 women that I just admired. And I would literally make a little chart. Like, when did they get into the business? When did they get their big promotion? When did they become an anchor? Also, when did they get married? When did they have children? And I do think that I might have been influenced by some of that and given maybe unrealistic expectations of what is possible for everybody in terms of how long you could wait. I mean, every yearly exam, I would ask my doctor, can I wait just a little bit longer, just a little bit longer, just a little bit longer? And I think I think it's better to maybe be more transparent about the fact that time is not infinite. There is a biological clock, but there are also options. So if you, as I did, end up at 37 and a half, and they're like, hey, you have kind of a diminished ovarian reserve, you might be able to have 1 kid, but 2 probably won't be very easy. You know that there is an option. We did IVF, we banked embryos. My daughter was the first one. We've had a few that didn't work out. So I do think it's important for me personally to be really transparent so that anyone that's looking ahead understands some of the reality of fertility, of biology, but also know that there are options out there. And it is, I think the big caveat is that it is daunting. It's a lot.
Well, and also, like you said, be methodical so that it is easy, especially if you're very career driven. Um, I certainly was in my 20s and my 30s and still am. But, in my 30s, I wasn't thinking about having a child, getting married. That wasn't my mindset. I was thinking it all the time in the world. I was 32. I was young, especially when you're in these major cities where everyone's kind of holding out and waiting. It's
Yeah.
not, you're considered on the younger side still. Um, my guidance has always been, if you can freeze your eggs, do so,
Yeah.
because then you give yourself so much more independence and give yourself time, whether you want a partner or not, but be a little bit more selective than just someone that you're like, oh, this is the right timing for me. And going back, I just want to talk about the IVF process one more, a little bit more. How did you get through those times where it's so hard on your body?
Yeah.
What would you recommend for someone who's just like, this is tough, and maybe it's not the first embryo transfer isn't successful, or the first time they did egg retrievals they didn't get enough, or they didn't get viable ones? Like, how did you get through that process?
Well, I went through this during COVID too. It was like in January 2020, I decided to do this. And then adding COVID on top was a lot, particularly because I was covering the White House. So there were a lot of layers of complexity. For me personally, we were pretty average on everything, but I was really educated about the statistics, about the reality. This was not, there are no guarantees, right? I keep going back to that. That was a big thing, but also making sure that your health is as good as it can possibly be. So I see a naturopathic physician, make sure like nutrition is on point. This is a huge priority. I mean, I would be fine not going on vacation for a year as long as I can make sure that the healthcare and your health is being looked after. I think that is huge, not only for your mental space, but also just for your outcome, making sure that you're eating well, that you're exercising, that you're sleeping, that your nutrition is on point. I think all of those are important, not only for the physical outcome, but also just psychologically, because it is a lot to put on yourself. And if you're not feeling your best, that just compounds it. But I would also encourage people who aren't going through it to just be kind to people. Because I know I got a couple questions while I was going through this, some of the ones that didn't work, like, oh, are you pregnant? Because the drugs can actually make you much puffier, much more early. And again, that's not a question you should be asking people in public service announcement. But when it comes to IVF, it can be even more sensitive, because if you know something's high risk or it's not working out or it may not work out, it's a very sensitive subject for people. So I think it's important to just always be kind to one another, because you never know what people are going through outside of work or outside of whatever event you're working together on.
Absolutely. And you brought up about taking breaks and being healthy mentally. What do you do to break away from the news cycle and just reset and have that mental health maintained?
So family is a pretty big priority outside of work. It's been family and work. You have to be, I think, ruthless in your priorities. There's not a lot of time for like yoga retreats and such. So Right now, it's a big priority for me, fitness and health. I work out with a trainer. I would give up a lot of things before I'd give that up. I need an adult supervising me. I need money on the line to make sure I'm actually going to exercise. That's huge. And then just spending time in relationship with my daughter and my husband as well. But she's a new dollhouse. We play with the dollhouse. We play with Duplos. We go where we spend a lot of time in nature. That is so key for me because it brings me so much joy, and it can be very grounding as well because no one cares what scoop you just had, right? Your mom, hand me the Peppa Pig Duplo. We need to get this grocery store under construction. I think those things are really really key, and also know when you're. This comes with experience. If you do feel that you're burned out, which can happen easily, you do need to be aware of that and have ways to deal with that. And I think again, sleep, health, fitness, those are big things to lean back into.
This year coming up, what is, if you don't mind sharing, some people don't think it's a jinx, but what is your biggest goal for yourself? What is a personal goal, career goal? What do you want to do this year? What are you setting out to do?
A big thing for me is completing a book proposal. I've always wanted, we go back to the train rides between Wilmington and Philadelphia. The goal was to be on TV, but also to write books, to do the larger storytelling. And that's a huge goal. I'm sure my bosses at CNN will be thrilled to hear that I want to take on, something else. But I do think that's incredibly important to me because the news, it's so micro, it's happening so fast. To pull back on a couple of the major stories that I've covered, that is a goal. It is something that, I came in early today. I was here at 7 a.m. to spend about an hour working on that book proposal.
Well, I'm excited. I'm excited for what the future holds for you. And it's been an absolute joy getting to know you better.
Well, thanks so much for having me. It was great to chat with you, and good luck to the rest of the industry out there. It's going to be an intense year.
Well, thank you again. And for more insightful interviews covering media and politics, go to Mediaite.com and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube.